beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to start off with, we'll just kind of dive into some foreign news. We'll go ahead and start off with the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and we'll get into a little bit of our foreign policy and kind of analyze what's going on, and also look at the broader picture and what chess, moves are being played with our foreign policy and our free market, which we don't really have a true free market, but within the crevices, there is some free market still going on. But we'll go ahead and dive into Ron Paul Liberty Report right now. Maybe. Let me reload it here. We might be having some technical difficulties here. Just hold on for a second. It was just playing fine a minute ago. Let me try another source here. Sure what's going on. Okay, I can't even get into my articles right now. either. So just give me a second and I'll try not to crash my computer. Okay. Now, I'm just trying to get this clip to play here. And it should start going now.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams from the Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, welcome to the program again.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Thank you.
Good. Want to visit today a bit on Iraq. It's an ongoing saga, and we dealt with that a long time ago as far as, well, matter of fact, I started dealing with it in 1998, trying to tell people to stay out of there. But anyway, we worked on a lot in Washington. But this is continuing. The war was, the literal war was started, the current war was started in 03. So that's 12 years it's been going on. And it doesn't look like it's getting any better. The admission seems to be now that their policies didn't work. Amazing. And they have to admit it. They can't avoid it. It came up in the presidential campaign when Jeb Bush was ambivalent about endorsing his brother's war. And he said, sure, I endorse it. But then the heat came, and it wasn't a good idea. Matter of fact, it was interesting today. He was asked about it, and he defended his father, but not his brother on something in foreign policy. So, but anyway, they're recognizing that there's a problem in all the pundits and all the military people and all the stations. They're coming up with all the solutions. And quite frankly, they don't even come close. I imagine you've been watching for some of these proposals on how we all of a sudden can go glide into victory and say that we have made the world safe for democracy and no life was lost in vain.
That's true. You know, President Obama said on Monday that, I don't really have a Syria strategy yet, or an Iraq strategy. We're waiting for the Iraqis to step up, and this after how many months of us escalating and being involved. But as you point out, they recognize that what we're doing is not working. So what is the new approach? Every single item on the new list is an item from the wish list of the military-industrial complex.
You mean they have an influence on our policy? Well, yeah, I'm afraid that is true. And one big issue is the additional training. All of a sudden they think, well, we need better training of the Iraqis. Is that going to convince them not to drop their weapons and run and turn them over to ISIS? I mean, that's not going to work. And they're getting ready to build another training base over there, aren't they?
How can what we've not achieved in 12 years be achieved in a couple of months? And by building, as you point out, a new, when in doubt, when everything fails, build a huge new American military base. Everyone will be happy.
Well, we have a huge embassy there. We haven't deserted there. But, really the downfall of that whole area is going to be when they have to leave the embassy in Baghdad, which would be, politically speaking, for American policy, a real disaster. But, of course, we don't need it. I complained about the $1 billion they were spending on that. That'd be better spent well here at home or leave it with the taxpayers. But to build that was just crazy. But there's other suggestions. They say, well, they have agreed with this wonderful government that we have created that we're not going to directly support the Kurds. Yet the Kurds have their point. They want their homeland. They're good fighters, and they probably, if they had a good fight going, they're probably not going to drop them. Some people saying, well, okay, let's give the Kurds the weapons and let's support the Kurds. But hardly was that's going to be a solution.
No, because the Kurds have only fought for Kurdish areas. I mean, they're fighting for something very different than from what the U.S. wants. They're fighting to carve out a piece of Iraq for their homeland. So it's inevitable that the Kurdish strategy and the Iraq and U.S. strategy are going to collide. It's inevitable.
And I've heard some of the generals on TV and some of the political pundits saying, well, we need to get Turkey to act differently and be on our side more. At the same time, you don't hear much about what Israel should be doing. But nobody really talks about Israel, but they're very much involved. And sometimes when they don't say a whole lot, they say a whole lot about Iran. Sometimes if they don't say a whole lot about the tactical process there, maybe they endorse everything that we're doing. But they don't get introduced into the general debate on evening TV.
Well, certainly with regard to Syria and the goal of overthrowing Assad, Israel is firmly on the side of Turkey and Saudi Arabia, which is in favor of overthrow. In fact, it's been shown many times that Israel treats wounded al-Nusra fighters, which is the Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria, they're treating them on Israeli soil. So they are certainly involved in this.
You know, there was a retired general, Marine General John Allen, had some interesting things to say about, what we should do. But the one point that he made that caught my attention was it's going to last a long time, but they've all been saying that. But he says the difficulty is we're fighting an ideology. And, we've talked about ideologies, and we also know that ISIS is not the country of Syria or the country of Iraq. It's amorphous, it's all over the place, and it is ideological. And ideas, both good and bad, are very difficult to handle. But when that idea becomes popular with the people, both good and bad, that the ideology is very, very important. So I think he's right that it's ideological, and yet I don't see where they come anywhere close to the solution.
Well, it's convenient that it's an ideology because it harkens back to the Cold War. When I first graduated university, it was at the end of the Cold War, and I just started getting interested in foreign affairs, and I hadn't developed my non-interventionist philosophy fully, but I was desperate to find some sort of a job in that field. And everyone working in foreign affairs was desolate at the time. They were so depressed. There were no jobs. People were laid off. We didn't really have the peace dividend that we'd hoped for, but jobs were absolutely drying up, and it was palpable that they were longing for a new Cold War. And now we have, with this fight against the ideology of ISIS and a new Cold War against Russia, I imagine they're popping champagne corks in Washington.
Well, I think it's safe to go along with the saying that Obama doesn't have a strategy, but some of the time he accidentally, I guess, has a good point. I like the idea of what's happening in Cuba right now, the fact that we're opening up an embassy. Why don't we move in that direction? And as much as he's been criticized over talking to the Iranians, that's reasonable. Why shouldn't we doing this? But many of the critics of Obama aren't criticizing for what they're always complaining that he's not doing enough, he's not aggressive enough. So the average critic that we hear on the evening news, they don't have a solution either.
Well, the solution is to do more of the same. You mentioned General Allen. I'm looking at this piece that we were looking at earlier today. He says he laid out his 5 areas for dealing with the Islamic State: denying safe haven to its forces, disrupting the flow of foreign fighters, curbing access to foreign finances, providing humanitarian relief, and responding to the group's propaganda. This is his solution in Syria and Iraq. But nowhere is it suggested that why don't we back off of Assad? This is the guy who's bombing ISIS regularly, despite the lies put out by the U.S. Embassy in Syria. He's bombing ISIS regularly. Why don't we back off of trying to overthrow the guy who's fighting the ones that we're supposedly against?
Well, it's either they're not very smart or they have an ulterior motive we don't fully understand, but nothing seems to be going well. And this is an opportunity for us to present our position because nobody's going to be changing it who are in charge now. But these people who want more, the neocons and the pseudo-neocons want more troops, they say, yeah, but we're going to be sending in more troops. There's 500 on the way, for this base that they're going to build and for training and all this. But we're going to keep those troops away from the front lines. Where are the front lines? Any American establishment, any truck, any building, any embassy is a target. We found that out, in Libya. But they say we're going to keep the troops away from harm, out of harm's way. But they reassured us that this is not just an American fight. There are others in there. The British just sent 125, or at least committed to 125 troops they're going to send over there. So this is multinational. We're not really in charge, and I guess if anybody believes that, they're kidding themselves.
It's a Potemkin village of an international coalition. But you point out the issue of I was going to mention actually the UN Security Council. They also mentioned that the White House is pursuing a range of options, but their point is accelerate training and equipping of security forces, and we've got to find a way to get the Sunnis to fight. Can you imagine, from 6,000 miles away, we've got to try to find a way to get Sunnis to fight the war that we want them to fight?
Maybe foreign occupation is part of the problem, and maybe that's ideological, and maybe ideologically the people themselves, in spite of all the shortcomings of all the factions, maybe anybody who looks like they're against foreign occupation. El-Sadr was continues to be popular, even though he is a religious person. He's Shia. But if the Sunnis want to be on his side to prevent occupation, they do. So they won't listen to. Now, so another argument against what is happening here, and we have to prevent it immediately, is it looks like we've stirred up so much trouble. There could be a big war. I don't know how much bigger we want for us as Americans and our military and our money, because we're in like 6 or 7 battle zones. And they're saying that what we should watch for is a major war between the Sunnis and the Shia.
Yeah, we both saw this piece on McClatchy today, which was very interesting. The idea of a 1914 of the sort of relatively insignificant, in a way, part of the world blowing up. But you talked earlier about the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. You know, that's the sort of the center of Shia population in Iraq. So you can imagine if the Sunnis did overrun Baghdad, you think that could be a trigger for a real war of Iran getting involved directly, of Saudi Arabia getting involved, the U.S. getting involved. That could be the trigger.
Well, you know, very early on when we had talked about, and I had a very strong suggestion that was self-determination, but no outsider should have the goal of keeping Iraq unified. And it all started in the Woodrow Wilson era, World War I, the Versailles Treaty, and that era. And so the country's been artificial. So, and even some of the individuals who are talking now about new policy, they're not talking about allowing them to draw a line. They're saying that we in the West, because we're still the smartest and the richest and the most powerful, why don't we start drawing lines and divide the lines up? And but the only way that'll work, and I do think that is a solution, is just leave them alone. And I'll bet they could come up, they get tired of killing each other, and people are going to be satisfied, to have their particular area. But the principle of self-determination is a good one. It gets more complicated when you're trying to compensate and correct the mistakes made by people who don't belong there. But that, as far as I'm concerned, is still a very good solution.
You know, there is one good example, and unfortunately the well has been poisoned by intervention. But if you look at what happened with Czechoslovakia, which you mentioned Wilson earlier, this was an artificially constructed state after the First World War. And when the Cold War ended, they decided that they no longer wanted to be together as a unified country. They wanted to split. Thankfully, at the time, the U.S. was not involved in fomenting too much chaos like they did in Yugoslavia later. These two countries were allowed to peaceably split, and now they enjoyed very close ties. They're both in NATO. They trade with each other. They get along with each other. And so that is the model of dealing with these sort of artificial entities.
You know, that's interesting because I haven't traveled a lot through Europe. I was there during the time I was in the military, but I went to Czech Republic to celebrate a libertarian group there, and they got me over to Slovakia, and then I went to Austria, and I thought, boy, this is where the cradle of Austrian economics was born. But it's fascinating that it was work. And going from one country to the next was relatively easy. And I saw the remnants of the Soviet fences and all that. So no, it was a big difference when people were allowed to make these decisions. And unfortunately, we handicap them too much. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report. You can find that on YouTube. Just type in Ron Paul Liberty Report, or you can also catch them on truthandmedia.com. So, the problem, one of the points in there was, a lot of the problem is no one's going to join a fight that is sided with the West if that's what they feel has been abridging their freedom. This is why you're seeing so many people join ISIS, is because it is the only alternative that they see. And they don't feel that they're being represented by the West at all. Okay. Give me a second here. Now, a lot of people are like, well, we constantly leave a vacuum. And a lot of people go, what's the libertarian solution? And really, a libertarian solution is, the individuals within this country need access to the knowledge. The ability to get that is pretty crucial, but we don't see forcing our way of life upon others. What it is I think that you would see more freedom within a lot of places, but they've been suppressed, and knowledge is, what we have is not what they have. And when they get it, you tend to see more freedom because they have more knowledge. One thing that kings, queens, and emperors and everything always use to their advantage over others is knowledge. You see it today even in the military-industrial complex when they are creating stuff that's top secret, and basically, we don't even know the extent of the technology they have. And I think tech companies have somewhat caught up, but as you'll kind of notice, a lot of times they're contracted with the government. And some of these tech companies probably came up because they were helping the government. But how would Iraq, or even just, sections of Iraq, obtain freedom? And how do we deal with the policing here in America? There's a common ground somewhere there that a lot of people don't understand, and it can be complex but simple at the same time. And I know that's kind of oxymoron, but it's one of those things where it's complicated because you have to break out of what you believe, what you've been taught, brainwashed with. And you have to be able to kind of think out of the box and then understand, human interactions. And, there's statistics out there that show, one city that got rid of their police force, crime dropped by 60%. We see the, videos of police brutality constantly coming out. It's one of those things that we've been trained basically to accept this type, without police, without, government, who would stop the bad people. Well, the problem is they don't usually stop the bad people. The bad people don't stop because, well, they might go to jail. They don't care. And at the same time, we find out that the arbitrary authority that is given to these people tends to go to their head quite quickly. And there's studies out that show that. type of mentality grows when you give these people artificial authority. Basically, the belief that they have authority, and then give the belief to the citizenry that they have authority. But what's the alternative? Well, I got one out of Foundation for Economic Education by Jeffrey Tucker. How policing works in a privatized city. And this kind of, you take some of these ideas and you can expand upon them. And, we don't have a perfect answer. You're not going to have a utopia. That's not what a libertarian believes is, some type of utopia of freedom where we're all dancing in a prairie of flowers. No, it's nothing like that. It's not giving this artificial authority to people that in a way gives them usually some type of immunity to abuse that power. It says here, quote, all the common areas of Atlantic Station, including the streets, sidewalks, parks, and alleys, are private property. This reads one line buried in the rules of conduct for Atlantic Station, Atlanta, Georgia. A marvelous city within a city. But it's this one line that makes a critical difference. It's why this 1 square mile of the heart of this great city has done more to model beauty, prosperity, diversity, and happy living than 50 years of urban renewal and other government programs. The entire community was built on top of the old Atlanta steel mill, which opened in 1901 and closed in the 1970s, leaving desolation in its wake. Atlantic Station opened 10 years ago as a visionary entrepreneurial venture. The brainchild of the Jacoby Group, headed by Jim Jacoby, funded mostly with private money. The city helped with tax breaks and some infrastructure funding, which I don't believe in, but that's come past that. It's not a gated community walled off from the public for only the elite. There is no charge to get in. Everything is public access and subject to all the laws governing commercial property. The difference between the public and private city, however, is huge. You can tell when you have entered the space, whereas many areas of Atlanta struggle. This area in the heart of the city is clean, bright, ebullient, bustling with enterprise and life. On an evening recently, on the way to the movies in the spectacular theater there, I sat outside on the patio of a Mexican food restaurant and watched adults and children playing games and having fun on the green space that serves as a mini park in the middle of this urban experiment in capitalism. There are people from all races, classes, ages. They listened to the live band and sang along. As I sat there, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the sense of a mini utopia. It's like an idealized scene you see in a commercial for soda or some happy vacation getaway. It was one of the most blissful city scenes I've ever witnessed. It was a typical evening, and it was all taking place in a place that was only 20 years ago a burned-out, low-rent disaster zone, the kind of place people flee. Now the migration patterns have changed. Atlantic Station is a place where you want to live and work. I was walking along, and a uniformed police officer greeted me, "Good evening," and I responded with delight, and we had a nice conversation. She wanted to know if I was enjoying the evening. Made a few bar recommendations. We chatted about the weather, and I went on. She was uniformed, yes, and probably armed, but in a non-threatening way. She looked sharp and helpful as well as official. Then it struck me, the police in the community are privately employed by main stakeholders in the community, which are the merchants, apartment owners, and other service providers. The streets are also private but public access. For this reason, the police themselves have a deep investment in the well-being of the community and the general happiness of the consumers who stop there. They are employees of the free enterprise system. In particular, Atlantic Station owners contract with Chelsea Brown for experienced service. Sometimes in today's overly militarized environment, it is easy to forget policing is a completely legitimate, useful, important profession. They are there to make sure that everyone is keeping the rules and to apprehend the vandals and criminals who break the rules. You might even call them thin blue line. What makes the difference here is the private nature of the contract that employs them. Just as every other employee in the community, they have a direct stake in the value of the space. They are there to serve customers just as every merchant in the community does. The more valuable the community, the more valuable their own jobs. They have the incentive to do their job well, which means enhancing the experiences of rule keepers while driving out those who do not keep the rules. The rules of Atlantic Station are rather strict, more so than I would have thought. There is a curfew for teens. You can't wear gang-related or obscene clothing. You can't carry weaponry. You can't use indecent language. You can't smoke. You can't be boisterous. You can't shout or be vulgar. You can jog, but you can't just take off running through streets like an animal. If rules like this were imposed by city government, people would rightly complain about the violation of rights. So why aren't these rules violations of rights? Because it's private property and the owners determine them. More importantly, the point of the rule is not to control people and run their lives. It is to enhance the value of the community for everyone. They can be changed depending on circumstances. They can be imposed strictly or not. It all depends on what's best for Atlantic Station and, yes, what's best for business. You can read the rest of the article. It's pretty long. Now, another thing about, I don't agree with all the rules there, but that's private property. That's their, just like someone's house. If they say you can't bring a gun to their house, I guess you can't bring a gun to their house. That's their house. And let's say that house sits on property and they have a lot of woods or whatever they allow you to hike through. That's basically the same thing going on here. But they've hired security, privatized police that enforce the rules there. And even though I don't agree with the rules, I agree with the privatized police. Why? Well, the simple thing is they can't do all this crap that you see happening with government law enforcement. Why? Because they're not stealing your money to get paid. Taxation is theft. They're paid by tax dollars. Just because they do something wrong, you can't withdraw your money from them. Therefore, they can continue to operate. In a privatized police force, if these privatized law enforcement on this private property acted in ways where they're slamming people to the ground, they're making it a hostile area, they would be fired immediately. It wouldn't pass. So you get to withdraw your consent from them. They don't have this artificial authority that you can't, pull back out of. That's the problem with the government law enforcement. And of course, Obama and his little minions are always trying to push this. Well, we need a federalized police. That just makes it worse. that makes the problems worse. And a lot of times you see that people that kind of are all connected with each other are helping pay or, fund these violent riots against law enforcement that then they need to call National Guard out. And you keep seeing the same people behind the scenes pulling the strings. And it's the same people that are pushing, well, this is why we need it to be federalized. Why? Because you're inciting violence to justify it? Communities should be able to withdraw their money. There shouldn't be any federal tax for law enforcement at all. Federal police should go away. Your community should have its own law enforcement. And when they're not doing right, citizens should have the right to withdraw their money from them. But they don't ever want to talk about that. Give me a second here. Okay. I had to find it here, but this is from We Are Change, if you don't know. G7 and Bilderberg are going on. How I witnessed the death of journalism at the G7 and Bilderberg. Again, this is from We Are Change, Luke Radowski.
This is Radowski of wearechange.org. I am here in Austria, and I'm joined by Charlie Skelton, an amazing journalist who writes for The Guardian and many other online publications. Now, me and Charlie wanted to discuss something very serious and very important. We just came from the G7 Press Center, where we literally saw the death of journalism, the final nail in its coffin. It was just incredible to see. Charlie, you were there as well with me. Can you just tell us what we saw?
Well, it's a bit hard to describe. I'm still processing it. It was you described it as a death of journalism. It was an amazing, extravagant death that it was engaged in. It was an incredible centre, and it was all put on by the German government. It must have cost, I don't know how much, but I asked a spokesman how much it cost. They didn't give out a figure yet. There will be some kind of figure, but that figure will be enormous because it was the most incredible place to work. Never mind all the workstations, all of the free footage they would give you, all the pooled footage and photos. There was also, free food, wine, an endless buffet, flowing drinks, kind of recreation room, table football. It was an extraordinary. It was like being on a cruise ship, basically.
It was too easy. It was too comfortable. It was like we were being pampered by the government that we're supposed to be reporting on. I see many kind of conflict of interests with what I just saw, and also just some of the conversations I had with the other journalists there. It was just shocking because it wasn't journalism at all. To me, it's puppeteering or regurgitating. It was like the German government and the G7 Press Center were, the mother bird, regurgitating just all the information on the things. What kind of...
We were all in a big nest, we were all there you're absolutely right. And we were corralled. It was very controlled, very, controlled. It was in a good way. It was like, you imagine if you're a kind of, you're in your 70s, you've earned a bit of money and you go on a world cruise. It's like that feeling of just like wherever I go, I'll be fine. There's always going to be people on hand. If I need a drink, they'll bring it. Literally, there were serving people, I just sit down, and if I couldn't get my fork onto my empty plate quicker than they would take it away. It was like proper excellent service. You know, I'm now critiquing it like a restaurant because that's sort of what it was.
But my question is, what kind of ethic violations, what kind of journalism violations did you kind of experience or see there? What do you think is really the bigger picture of everything that kind of went down?
I don't think it was. It was almost like it was kind of a violation of reality. That's what it felt like to me, because everyone was walking around with these you probably noticed, these very sort of serious expressions. You know, they'd all flown in from wherever, Australia, Japan, the US, England. They're all there, you know, doing their thing, and it was all like, right, we've got to get this stuff done. I mean, I don't quite know what they were doing, because what they were doing is simply writing around the various press releases that were coming around. So in other words, it was journalism. It wasn't journalism. It was the regurgitation of stories and footage and stuff, all the stuff that had been thrashed out months ago anyway. Yeah. And then we were sitting in that press area, which was amazing, and hats off to whoever organised it. But we were sitting there, and they had these big screens showing the kind of footage from like the Alpine walkabout they went on, you know, Obama and Merkel and Cameron and all the others. And it looked so weird and false and pathetic and nothing and like a little children's program or something. Yes. And yeah, everyone's looking at it, you know, that's them doing that thing. Yeah, they're getting on with that. And I'm sitting there sort of looking around at people going, well, this isn't anything. This is what we're taking this seriously, right? Yeah. It was like being at a pantomime and just everyone taking it seriously, what was going on stage.
It was like the German government did the job for the journalists. It was just everything that, you know, they were doing there, they could have easily done from a hotel, like you mentioned before. And it was just interesting and intriguing. I mean, seeing this kind of new experiencing it firsthand is surreal, because we know the mainstream media is not doing their job in any way, shape, or form. But when you're there, and when you're like literally seeing the papers, the pictures, the videos just being fed to the journalists, and the journalists just retyping the words that we're giving to them and selling it to you like it's news. It's not. I call it propaganda, because we're not getting any kind of investigative journalism. We're not getting any kind of vetting. We're not getting any kind of hard questions. And this is what we call, you know, journalism. This is what we call the mainstream media.
It's public relations. Yeah. It's public relations is what it is. And the people who were there were engaged in a giant public relations operation, an extremely well-run one, and extremely expensive. So it should be good, and it was. And so they were just. The whole thing was a press release. Everyone was just part of a giant press release, and there's this kind of sick agreement between the media and the, whatever you want to call them, in this case the government, the powers that be, whoever happens to be organising something like this, that they'll go along with it. So they'll go, yeah, we'll print this stuff because we've got to kind of fill up our things and make out that we're doing the news. And if you give it to us, we'll then do that. It'll be fine. We'll thrash out some kind of a kind of lame agreement here, whereby we all just participate in the same extremely empty and facile charade.
Or circle jerk, as I would call it, to be honest with you. It's jerkalism. It's not journalism, it's jerkalism, as it's called. He wrote a great article about just the whole process. You guys should definitely check it out. It's going to be in the link below. But overall, moving forward, you're one of the few journalists that actually reports on.
Give me a second.
But overall, moving forward, you're one of the few journalists that actually reports on serious issues, does the investigating. You're actually here in Austria with us at the Bilderberg meeting. Obvious question would be, obvious answer, but I want to hear your perspective on it. Why is there no press at the Bilderberg group?
Well, this is something obviously, every time you come to something like this, you kind of ruminate on it and you think, well, why? I don't quite know why. And I realised that having come from the G7, it's kind of crystallised a lot of things in my mind. And something I've had said to me and accepted as kind of, okay, fine, by journalists in the past, but I'm talking about mainstream journalists, not people like you. They've said, well, look, I mean, I could go, but what would I report on? You know, there's no press centre, there's no press releases. What I actually do, you know, and I've sort of gone in the past, gone, yeah, no, I guess you're right, yeah. And now I'm absolutely not accepting that. That is not good enough. is not good enough. It's not good enough to say, do you know what, I can't do it because it's a bit hard. It'll be like calling a pest exterminator and then going, well, I'm sorry, the mouse has gone under the cooker. I can't get it. I'm not really cut out for that. I don't want to sort of bend down and get it. So I'm just going to stand here and no.
When it comes to actually working, I think we've talked about this before. I think the problems are kind of twofold. Some journalists, circlists, are kind of lazy and kind of entitled. Other ones are kind of stretched too thin. And when it comes to involving more resources and actually investigating something and making the phone calls and being on the ground and investigating it, a lot of times they're like, I'm not going to put in all those resources. And the second point of view is there's obviously some kind of censorship happening, obviously, of this meeting as well, because if a news organization cared about news and information, they would be covering 100 or so of the top world's corporate leaders, banking, government institutions, and they would actually care to do the legwork, but they don't. So I think,
it's a bit hard to pick those two things apart. I think because the first point you made about being stretched too thin is absolutely correct, and it's become a truism that mainstream newspapers and newsrooms, they've just been eviscerated. There hasn't been the funding. They can't compete with the staff. So that's why your newspapers are just publishing press releases that have written around a bit, and because they can't afford really to do anything else. The age of that kind of thing is, well, it's certainly gone for the mainstream to a large degree. Obviously, stories do break, and there are exceptions to this, obviously, and obviously this is not a sweeping statement about all journalists, I think, but there are situations and processes that take place, like the G7, where the very worst kind of dynamics are brought up to right in front and centre, and it makes you go, okay, this just isn't working. This isn't anything at all.
And it's easy and it's lazy and it's very convenient for them, especially with just being able to puppet something and not actually have to work and then be able to work on other stuff before. So I see that as like one of the main problems that this kind of new day and age of information and this kind of journalism is facing. And then I also see the other side of it, which is just complete and utter nonsensical, not caring, not giving a damn, being entitled, and also some forms of obvious censorship by the higher-ups that we see, especially when it comes to something like Bilderberg and being able to report on this honestly and ethically. Last night we met with pretty much the whole press corps of the White House, talking to them, being able to, have a couple drinks with them, off record. Those journalists were just telling me, like, yeah, we're not journalists. You guys are journalists. We're not journalists in any way, shape, or form. And other ones just dismissed it and wouldn't even want to hear it. And they wanted to just talk about food, which is just surprising. So with this landscape, how do you see things evolving? How do you see things changing? And how can we maybe reverse this trend?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? I think that people in general respond, by which I mean the kind of media consuming public, respond well to things that they feel are authentic and real, and that are grounded in some kind of reality of maybe they've had to get this fact, maybe they've had to go somewhere and get this document, or maybe they've had to chase after this guy and stick a microphone in his face, and people I think are still, luckily, fairly well attuned to rubbish, and I say that, obviously we get inured because of how much stuff we get is just so packaged and processed. It's like school kids where they can't chew anymore. You've read that story where the food they're eating is so kind of soft. It's like they've lost the power in their jaw. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like that it can be a bit like that. But even so, I think that when the real stuff comes along, and the real stuff doesn't have to be anything complicated. It could be something literally like I remember you last year just running alongside Peter Sutherland, sticking a microphone and just getting in their face, getting through the kind of all of the packaging and sort of peering inside and just abrasively getting at something, anything, literally anything. And I think that's when people see it, they go, okay, well, I'm dealing with something that's real here. Until, eventually they'll become much more sophisticated and they'll have fake versions of you running around doing an entirely fake version of this. In which case, at that point, I'm just going away and living on a boat somewhere.
Charlie, it's, again, an honor and pleasure to be on the front lines of what you hear, not only at the G7, but right now at Bilderberg. Where can people find out your articles? Where can people check out more information about you?
Well, just go to the Guardian website and there'll be all kinds of stuff on there. And in a modern fashion, I am tweeting. Okay, oh yeah, yeah.
What's your Twitter name?
My Twitter name is, I don't know why it is this, it's Duke. It's D-E, I have to spell it every time I say it. Probably shouldn't get a Twitter name you have to say. Spell. It's D-E-Y-O-O-K, Duke.
If you want some real journalism, you got it. If you want some real journalism, follow Charlie on Twitter. And of course, we also have Change Media University. We are doing a one-on-one crash course. I will teach you how to do this at PorkFest. More information about Charlie and Change Media University will be in the description below. Thank you again so much for watching. If you found this talk helpful, click the like button. And of course, don't forget to...
We are Change. We are Change on YouTube. We are change.org. Check them out. You know, it's been brought up for years and years why Bilderberg isn't covered. You see G7, GA, all this crap. It's covered in the fashion like what they're talking about. And I think the G7, G8, it's kind of just, you know, look over here, and the Bilderberg is where they can really get things done. That's why you see, I think, probably a lot more important people, or, you know, people in power type situations, or corporate power, government power. And, you know, this is where they meet, is Bilderberg, and it's never covered. Except for alternative media that does cover it. And, you know, our media is so warped. Our mainstream media is just so warped anymore. When they go to parties and they, you know, hang out with these people and get special treatment by these people, you'd think they're going to report bad things about them. The media has become part of the establishment. Therefore, they're not going to report on themselves. Now, I have one other report. It's a lot shorter report than that one. But this one from the Alex Jones channel, exclusive Bilderberg deploys high-tech jamming to shut down communications. So when you do have alternative media covering this stuff, this is the response you get. And even if mainstream media was there, could they do anything?
Rob Dew here, reporting for Infowars.com. We have some breaking news. First off, just over this way, we're going to show you some shots of this. We have a sighting of the Hotel Interalpen. We're able to see the site, and it's along the road going to the golf course. And but that's not the big breaking news. The big breaking news is actually standing behind me. And what it looks like we have here is a communications type van, but not to enable communications, to disable communications. And here with more on that is Paul Joseph Watson, who just landed from Innsbruck today. Paul, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, we were just talking to an informed local who told us a few other interesting things, but he directly said that this vehicle is basically designed to cut off communications for anybody in the nearby area trying to cover Bilderberg as media. So this could be a transmitter, we're not sure, but we were told directly that this van is being used to cut cell phone signals so people can't broadcast and cover this event. So it's not enough that they have checkpoints 6 miles around the perimeter. Now we can't even cover the event via, standard cell phone coverage because they're directly interfering in people's communications. It's ridiculous.
And I'll tell you this, Paul, the Wi-Fi, we're supposed to have Wi-Fi at the place I'm staying at up on the mountain, and I haven't been able to get anything out of there. Only cell phone signals are the only thing that comes out. So I'm wondering if this has to do with that. There's also an antenna right over there. We'll shoot another long-range shot of that so we can show you what that looks like. It looks like it was pretty recent put up, but that could also be part of this triangulation grid that they're setting up to cut off communications.
Yeah, there was speculation during the Bundy Ranch siege that this was happening, that they were cutting off communications. That was never confirmed. We were told directly by a very informed local who said that this is exactly what's happening. So if they have to go to this level to shut down independent media and mainstream press coverage of this event, again, it illustrates how paranoid they are about any information leaking out of Bilderberg 2015.
And, I wouldn't be surprised if after we put out this report that suddenly this area becomes off limits, because right now we are free to travel in this area. You can actually see the barrier over here. You're not allowed to go over that way, and there's a barrier on the other side of the road over there, and those are basically, if you step over that line or if you are caught on the other side of that line, it is a €500 fine or 2 weeks in jail, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, and it's obviously quite near the golf course, which is still open. That's outside the perimeter, but people could just wander into that security zone on a whim. You could get families out hiking on the weekend, not aware of what's going on with Bilderberg, and they could just wander in and be subject to a €500 fine. It's insane.
Or if you knock your golf ball over into the fine area and that's your last one, hey, I could get my golf ball, and boom, €500 fine. Anything could happen. And guess what? Bilderberg is starting tomorrow. The elites will start landing at Innsbruck. They will be taken here either by car. Some might come by helicopter. Who knows how they're going to be getting here? Henry Kissinger, I think, is coming by teleportation device.
Well, I wouldn't put anything past him. But, I mean, this is a big story that, we've been told that this van is there to cut out communications. There's nobody in it at the moment. I'm sure there has been at some point. So this is a major breaking story. Bilderberg directly interfering in communications to prevent coverage of their conference.
Yeah, they're stifling all forms of communication. But what would you expect in the home of Adolf Hitler? I don't know. This is Rob Dew reporting for Infowars.com with Paul Joseph Watson. Here's a shot once again. If anybody out there knows what this is, please tell us in the comments of this video if we're wrong. But we've been told that this is a device, a communications device, to cut off communication to the outside world. Exactly what the elites want. They want to stay in shadows. They don't want to step out in the light and just say, hey, we're here to control you. We're here to control all your money. We want to get rid of cash so we can control everything about your life. They want to keep that hidden from you out there. And that's why we need to see people out there speaking up. We thank everybody for calling.
You can check out that report, rest of it, the Alex Jones channel on YouTube, and I'm sure they have it at Infowars.com. Now, with this whole thing, we also can see what's coming in our future by looking at Europe and things that they have enacted in Europe, they've been enacting here. And when you see the gradual, slow movement that created the European Union, the EU, we are slowly having that. And I really believe that the TPP is going to put us one step closer to this American Union. And I don't think it's going to be a North American Union. I think eventually it's going to be American Union, but that could be thrown off too because of Russia and China's involvement with a lot of South American countries and creating this new currency, I think, which also plays into why they might be pushing for this TPP so quickly, is to try to kind of neutralize that. Why they're opening trade with Cuba is to try to get Cuba more aligned with us. I think it's all chess moves. And things like cashless society, you've already heard out of Great Britain, it should be a crime to use cash. We should no longer accept this as common practice type talking. And, well, they've been talking about that here. They've been talking about that in a lot of EU places. They definitely want to get us off a cash-based society. And, a lot of people go, yeah, that's Bitcoin was their experiment. Bitcoin was their experiment. But there's so many other similar to Bitcoin type coins out there. I don't believe that. Bitcoin can't be controlled as easily as they would like. But when we think about RFID chips and things like that, they would be able to play around with things like that, I believe, and actually, accomplish this type of world order if people don't resist it. Now, you know, if we see an economic collapse, um, I think that gives them an opportunity. I think that's why they wouldn't be opposed to it. When people are in need and they have the solution already for them, I think that's when you see the most manipulation into a society. And they've done it in the past, and it's not something that's out of the realm for the future. Now, got a few things I kind of want to get into. I'm not sure where I want to start with this. Okay, I'm going to start with this one. You know, we've been talking about, you know, law enforcement, how they get out of control, and we talked about what Jeffrey Tucker put in his article about privatized policing. But we have one here out of the Free Thought Project related to law enforcement. Cops raid rap video of French Montana Busta Rhymes and Ja Rule for reports of victimless crimes. New York City, New York. Last week, the set of a rap music video featuring French. I don't know what the hell is going on here. Give me a second here. I hate when websites do that crap. Okay. Says here, featuring French Montana Busta Rhymes and Ja Rule, was raided by police who made 5 arrests for nonviolent crimes. According to the New York Post, nosy neighbors with nothing better to do called the cops. They saw a number of people on the video set using drugs and also noticed that a small number of the 200 people on the street were armed. There was no violence taking place, no person was being harmed, and no property was being damaged. It was just a group of artists and actors having a good time and filming a music video. It is also important to point out that most of the armed individuals on set were security guards, which is an understandable measure for an event of this caliber. Plainclothes police officers approached a security guard on the set and then quickly arrested him on weapons charges. Realizing that the party was over, many of the other artists, security guards, and extras began trying to ditch their drugs and weapons, but unfortunately the police were able to make 5 arrests. The war on drugs and the war on guns have provided government agents with the excuse to criminalize vast portions of society simply for carrying protection or making their own choices with their own bodies. Coincidentally, the music video was being filmed was a tribute to the recently deceased rapper Chinks, who was shot and killed in a drive-by. It makes perfect sense that the artist would want armed security guards on the set and even arm themselves just in case they did need protection. Okay. I got an update from yesterday. This has to do with the Texas officer involved in controversial pool party intervention. He resigns. McKinney, Texas, Corporal Eric Case Bolt, the McKinney police officer whose contentious attempts to rein in a disturbance at a pool party fell under national scrutiny, has resigned. McKinney Police Chief Greg Conley described Casebolt's behavior as out of control to reporters on Tuesday afternoon. The actions of Eric Casebolt are indefensible, Conley said. Casebolt had been placed on administrative leave after a video surfaced showing the officer who was responding to complaints of an out-of-control pool party last Friday using profanity and behaving particularly aggressive towards the young attendees. Casebolt was also seen in the video wrestling a 14-year-old girl to the ground and pushing his knee into her back. James Bishkin, an attorney representing Casebolt, confirmed Casebolt's resignation following a meeting with McKinney Police Department's Internal Affairs Unit to discuss potential charges against Casebolt. And that one can be found at truthandmedia.com. But there's one here that came out of truthandmedia.com yesterday. 4 Illinois police officers charged with felony perjury in drug case. Chicago, Illinois, 3 narcotics officers from Chicago and 1 officer from nearby town of Glenview have been charged with lying under oath during a hearing in March 2014. Glenview Officer James Horn, Chicago Sergeant James Padar, Chicago Officer William Prunetti, and Chicago Officer Vince Morgan are facing felony charges of perjury, misconduct, and obstruction of justice. The charges were announced on Monday by Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez. The charges stem from court testimony given by officers regarding a June 13th traffic stop in Glenview that led to a drug-related arrest. Joseph Sperling, a Glenview resident, was pulled over near his home by Prunetti after failing to use his turn signal. According to Prunetti's testimony, Prunetti also testified that he smelled marijuana from inside the car as he waited for Sperling to provide his license and insurance information. Prunetti then stated that Sperling admitted to having a small amount of marijuana with him. Prunetti said he ordered Sperling to step out of his car and stand next to the trunk. Close to a pound of marijuana in the backpack was in plain view in the back seat, according to Prunetti's testimony. Prunetti said that while the other officers stood watch, he performed a vehicle search and found the marijuana before handcuffing and arresting Sperling. Officers Horn, Padar, and Morgan each provided testimony to corroborate Prunetti's claims. But as a 5th officer was providing similar testimony backing up the statements of Prunetti, Sperling's lawyer surprised the courtroom by showing a police video that Goldman had subpoenaed. The footage showed directly contradicted testimony from all 5 officers. The video taken from a Glenview police vehicle camera showed that Prunetti did not wait for Sperling to hand over his license as he sworn under oath, but had immediately opened Sperling's car door upon his approach by unlocking it through the driver's side window and making Sperling step out of the car. The video also showed Sperling was frisked, handcuffed, and led back to a police vehicle before police began searching his car. A CBS Chicago News segment shows Prunetti's prompting Sperling to exit his vehicle. A transcript of the March 2014 hearing quoted the judge as saying in the courtroom following the revelation officers lied on the stand today. All their testimony was a lie, so there's strong evidence it was a conspiracy to lie in this case for everyone to come up with the same lie many times. They all lied. A 5th officer involved in giving questionable testimony, Glenview Sergeant Teresa Urbanowski, has not been charged but is on paid leave. Daniel Herbert, an attorney for Horn, was willing to acknowledge his client gave incorrect testimony but said that prosecutors have the burden of proving that the officers intentionally lied about a relevant fact of the case. The cities of Chicago, Glenview paid $195,000 total to Sperling in a federal lawsuit settlement prior to the charges against officers being filed. So at least these ones are being held accountable, at least up to this point. Now, I found this article. I'm just going to kind of cover it just because I can. Uh, it was something that came across my news feed, and I don't know. I kind of found it interesting. The hipster is dead, and you might not like who comes next. This out of Mashable.com. Says, what do you call me? I'm a 26-year-old writer who lives in a gentrifying neighborhood in Brooklyn. I'm a straight white man with a single speed bike and a mustache. I studied liberal arts in college and have ideas about stuff. You guys? Millennial, hipster, yuppie, all these or none. We don't have a term that quite encapsulates this corner of the despicable millennial intelligentsia, and like any other privileged member of so-called creative class, being called a hipster offends me for its inaccuracy. I demand to be snarked in precise terms. And I like how he puts in here. And like any other privileged member of so-called creative class, says here, let's consider something new. Yesies, young urban creatives. In a nutshell, a slice of Generation Y, born of suburban comfort, indoctrinated with the transcendent power of education, and affected by the conviction that not only do we deserve to pursue our dreams, we should profit from them. I am the Yessie, and it sounds sort of, well, yucky. More money is good, but more creative money is better. Yessies are hardly mythical creatures. If you live in a metropolitan area like New York or San Francisco, you probably know plenty. They're social consultants coordinating sponsored Instagram campaigns for lifestyle brands. They're programmers hawking Uber for weed and Tinder for dogs. They're boutique entrepreneurs shilling sustainable harvest bamboo sunglasses. Getting rich quick would be great, but getting rich quick and preserving creative autonomy, that's the Yessie dream. When they graduated college, unless they completed XYZ startup boot camp instead, many didn't bother attempting a traditional career path. They jumped headlong into a hectic win-lose pivot entrepreneurial stew, even if it meant a pay cut. According to this 2014 Deloitte survey, 6 out of 10 millennials cited their company's sense of purpose as part of the reason they chose their job. In the same study, just 12% identified own personal gain as a primary leadership priority. That sounds like me. I moved to NYC half a decade ago and promptly passed on a salary job in pharmaceutical marketing in favor of an unpaid editing internship. I've been hacking my way through the city's editorial underbrush ever since. The money ranges from very bad to sometimes okay, but the sense of personal validation is effing great. I am the Yessie. From boardroom to drawing board, unrequited Yessies. Not all Yessies follow such a direct path. There are plenty of 20-somethings who take a few steps down the road of traditional employment despite the growing suspicion that their unique intellect deserves more professional fulfillment. I call the group the unrequited Yessies. Let's talk about them. I'm not going to go ahead with the rest of this. You can find it at Mashable.com. But what I find is, a lot of us, a lot of you will always think about, if I could start my own company, if I could get this going, be an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people have these dreams. I don't think this is unique to this generation. What I do find a problem with is there's a large amount of these, what he's calling Yessies, that aren't that smart, aren't that intellectual as they believe to be. And we get inundated with these companies that are giving bad products or just way overpriced because they don't understand what it takes to make a business that not only can give, maybe sustainable products, but do it in a way that will be affordable. And a lot of these people don't understand what to expect out of their employees. Why? Because they've never had to be in those positions. And being someone that's been a supervisor, a boss, and been in the position of having people under me that came out of college, they were extremely small, that type of attitude, and they want to move up the chain, but the simplest tasks they cannot, follow through on. And the thing is, you might be, educated enough to do those jobs, but do you have the experience that it takes to understand not only how to do that job, but what to expect and how to treat your employees? I think that becomes another thing, because you either see the ones that are completely a-holes because, well, their business might be failing. I've seen that happen. And they blame it on their staff, why their staff is out there busting their butt trying to make something out of what they're given to work with. Or you see the ones that are so lax, they're more friends with all their employees, and their employees walk all over them and create a situation where profit is just drained out of the business. Not saying everyone's like this. There's people that are coming out of high school that have worked during high school, have educated themselves. I think that could start a business. I think a lot of the youth has been dumbed down. And we've talked about that quite a bit. The dumbing down of the American youth. And it's true. And it's not just American youth. It's youth in a lot of Western countries. And, we can look at times as being different. There's more knowledge out there. Well, it's not really more knowledge. We don't have more knowledge. We have more defined knowledge. We have more, okay, we're not working with theories. We've proven this part fact, and now we look at it as fact instead of theory. Which, if it's correct and it truly is fact, and you're looking at it as fact, then the things that you base it off of, you can go further with. What we have a problem with is we treat young adults as children. And we don't allow them to be those experimental type people. And believe me, I understand, the whole, trying to protect. But a lot of times, even the parents become a hindrance to the ability for your children to be prosperous. And you look at history. And yes, we might live longer, but that doesn't mean that we get stupider. That doesn't mean we hinder our education and the ability for these young adults to do things, because young adults are usually the ones that are creating new things, that are adventurous enough to go out and do the impossible. And when we look at history, you look at, historical figures, and they were a business owner, they led an army, blah, blah, it just goes on and on. Look at Lafayette. He brought a French army over from France and led them on the field. And he was 18. He just turned 18 when he brought an army over here and helped win the American Revolution. You look at other historians. If you weren't extremely successful, by 25, you were lagging behind. There were business owners, people that, what we would probably in today's term call children, own their own farms, their own companies, their own homes. We've dumbed down America. And I think that's where, looking at these people that are coming out of college, well, they've been treated like kids. They haven't been expected. I understand they want to get educated, but a lot of this stuff they should have been educated on. A lot of this stuff goes beyond. It should be a secondary thing to them working. And a lot of people have worked themselves through college in the past, but it's too easy for them not to anymore. To expect them to work through college when money's given to them to just live through college. Okay, I'm going to move on. I keep ranting and raving. This out of Mediaite. Fox's Stuart Varney debate with anti-fracking activists explodes. The interview is over. And it says here, imagine what would happen when you put anti-fracking activist Josh Fox in the same room as Fox Business Network host and pro-fracking activist Stuart Varney, and expected them to have a thorough debate on the controversial natural gas extraction method known as hydraulic fracturing. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of play this here.
And now this, from the EPA, quoting from their report on fracking. Okay, that's getting oil and gas from deep underground. Here's what they said. We did not find evidence that these mechanisms have led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water. Join me now, Josh Fox. He's the director and the producer of the anti-fracking documentary Gasland. Now, I took that as the conclusion of the EPA report. Well, hold on a second. That's what I took as the conclusion. You disagree with it, correct?
Well, absolutely. In fact, the EPA issued something of a retraction of that statement this weekend because it led to a lot of false reporting on the subject. What we're actually seeing here is a pattern within the Obama administration, specifically with regards to fracking and the EPA, which is that when you see a scientific report, now this report is 1,000 pages long. Nobody expects everyone over the weekend to have read the entire thing. But within the report is actually really damning evidence about fracking contaminating wastewater in Pennsylvania, in Texas, and in Colorado.
Wasn't that the actual way that fracking was conducted? It was mistaken in how fracking was done, as opposed to the whole process
absolutely
itself.
Not. What this report says is that fracking contaminates wastewater. Now, groundwater, not wastewater, groundwater. What the EPA does, however, time and time again, aquifers. Yes, aquifers. What the EPA has done time and time again on this issue is issue a scientific report which has actual science in it, and then slap on the top of it a press release or a statement that says, "Oh, nothing really to see here." We saw this in 2012 in Dimock, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Now hold on a second.
If you want me to get my point out,
why would the EPA, which I thought was definitely anti-fracking, they don't want you to frack. Why would they come out with a 1,300-page report which concludes we did not find evidence that these mechanisms
This investigation started in 2010 at the behest of Congress and the behest of citizens. What we've seen since the Obama administration in 2012 embraced fracking as national policy, wants to expand fracking, is that they are dialing back all of these investigations which started much, much earlier in the administration when the administration didn't know what their position was.
You think the administration wants to
know
frack?
This for a fact. Look, I've
the administration wants to frack?
Yes, absolutely they do. This fracking policy is squarely on the shoulders of the Obama administration. For the past 3 years, I have investigated For the past 3 years, I have investigated Obama administration's EPA and watched them time after time after time betray their own science. What you're seeing is a very deeply divided EPA, an EPA which has scientists in the field who are going out there. And they are investigating this issue, and they're coming back with evidence that fracking contaminates groundwater. And then, over and over again,
the head office, the PR office, it issues press releases that says, oh, actually nothing to see here. We saw this in Dimick in 2012. EPA went into Dimick and said to people, do not drink your water. In private letters. And then in the press, they came out and said, well, actually, this water is safe. These were things that were directly contradictory.
Here's
and
what
this
I
is
think
what is
you're right
happening
about.
in this report.
It is a deeply divided EPA.
Well,
if you're
it's
saying
an
that.
EPA that's under incredible influence of the oil
By
and
the
gas
way,
industry and of lobbyists, and that's been proven.
By the way-
Greenpeace FOIA'd the EPA.
It's always that. By the
Greenpeace
way,
FOIA'd the
I
EPA.
own property in that area.
And
on top of the
yourself
Marcellus
to me
Trench.
said at the
I
break
bought
that you
it.
would not frack
I
there.
bought it 12 years ago.
Yes.
Way before fracking was
and
even talked about. And
During
you know
the
what?
commercial break,
And do
you
know
said to
what?
me that you would not frack there.
And yet-
Why would you
Because
not frack
I-
on your own property and then prescribe it for other people
Because
in America?
I'm in the watershed, and let me finish my story.
And
when
everyone
I bought it 12 years ago, it was a joke in the area. This is way before fracking appeared. It was a joke in the area that if you turned the tap on, you could light the water.
Listen, brother,
that was way
absolutely not
before
true.
fracking.
And in fact,
What?
I am your neighbor.
Are you
I am your
kidding?
neighbor. Yes,
I was
listen,
there. I
this
bought the
EPA
property 12
report
years
does
ago.
not premiere in the middle of a vacuum. There are 470 scientific reports right now, peer-reviewed, that state that fracking contaminates groundwater. That's bad for the air. It's
Interesting
bad
that
for public health.
I'm wrong
And all
about
of these-
lighting the tap water before fracking
You
ever
are,
appeared.
you are absolutely
I'm not, 'cause
wrong.
I did it myself.
Because what we're talking about...
I did it myself.
I do believe you are lying right now.
Lying?
Because the point... Yes, I do.
The
On your
interview's
own
over,
show.
young man. The interview is over. I am not lying.
Okay.
I did it myself.
If you said to me
Thank you.
earlier that you
Goodbye.
would not want fracking in your own neighborhood,
You're outta here,
it's
son.
irresponsible for you to say
You are
on air
outta
that,
here.
that the rest of America should
I
frack.
don't call me a liar. Don't do that, son.
Well,
don't
I mean,
do it.
you're clearly obfuscating the truth over
Cut.
and over again during this segment.
That's it. Thank you very much, sir. Would you please leave?
So there you go, the heated exchange between Josh Fox and Stuart Varney. And, I do know that that was way before fracking existed, that in certain areas that you could light your, tap water. That was long, I heard my grandparents talk about stuff like that. So, yeah. But fracking does create problems, and because you either have extreme left or extreme right fighting each other, we're never going to get to the answer on mainstream media. Mediaite, again, you can find that. Now I got a short clip to play from AMTV about John Kerry's bike accident. So, let's play this. Conspiracy, John Kerry accident, assassination attempt by ISIL. Christopher Green, AMTV.
Get the ultimate in body armor protection from Fortress Survival, LLC. Get this multi-cam plate carrier, front and back, 2 10x12 level 3 trauma plates, 2 6x6 side plates, all level 3 NIJ lab certified. High quality performance, hardcore protection for the ultimate prepper and survivalist in your family. Hard hitting! Fortress Survival, LLC. Get all of your body armor and survivalist related supplies and gear from Fortress Survival. Click the link below right now. Hey everybody. I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is June. It is Friday. Hooray! Yippee! So excited. It is, what's the date? Well, I can't really see barely on my watch here. It looks like it's the 5th, or it might be the 6th, actually. I believe it's the 6th. If I'm wrong, blame my watch. And in the news today, Greece is on the skids. We've been reporting on this pretty much for the entirety of the existence of YouTube and the entirety and existence of this channel, going on over 5 years now. Greece needs another bailout, round 3. And the rumor is Tsipras is about to speak. You know, this very charismatic figure of the Syriza movement and party is set to speak. In fact, he might be speaking right now. Rumor has it there's been a falling out between him and the whore that makes up Angela Merkel and the Eurozone and the collapsing euro. And the rumor is Tsipras is turning to guess who? Putin. Vladimir Putin. Russia. The BRICS. Russia, China. Okay, we've talked about all this, how this is a currency war, how as these countries and these currencies and these unions and blocs, like what makes up the Eurozone, disintegrates, the rest of the world is going to flock, flock to where there is strength, to where nations aren't collapsing, to where currencies aren't collapsing, to where there's actual real fundamental growth. Now, there was a jobs report this morning that was relatively good. I think there was 280,000 non-farm payrolls, if I remember correctly. And I believe that the unemployment rate, the phony unemployment rate, was somewhere in the ballpark of around 5.5% or 5.4% or something like that. Even though the U6 underemployed those that can't find jobs, that have simply exited the labor market, again, all these numbers are massaged, are still above 10%. Now, this is making a lot of economists, and especially those on Wall Street, nervous because it indicates the Fed may raise interest rates sooner rather than later. And there's all this speculation that the Federal Reserve is going to raise maybe, I think Jim Cramer said, in November or at the end of the year. And there's all of this anticipation built into a measly, potentially 50 basis point move. I mean, it's almost zero. We're at zero on the federal funds rate right now. And there's all this excitement and terror in the eyes of Wall Street that there might be a measly 50 basis point move. Again, imagine if interest rates normalize to their historical trend line. Imagine if a mortgage, instead of 4.5% or 5%, doubled and was 10%. Imagine what that would do to housing. Imagine what those in that interest rate environment would do to the credit market, people's minimum credit card payments. Again, the United States of America entirely functions on super leverage, debt, and funny money. It's exactly why we're living through and experiencing this collapse today. Also, kind of a little bit conspiratorial, but I wanted to bring it up because it got me thinking. John Kerry injured not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, we reported on this, I believe it was last week, allegedly falling on his little cute bicycle, wearing his little short shorts so he could kind of show off his, rear end to photographers, I guess. Supposedly fell and broke his femur, a very, very serious injury. I believe it's either the largest or one of the largest bones in your body, and then was airlifted in this huge military aircraft of some kind. Some of you might have the specifics on this transport plane, this huge, it could hold like 100 military personnel at once or more, I think several hundred. And they rush him back, I believe it was, to Boston to be treated, of which he's going to have a minimum of a 6 month recovery time, according to the mainstream media and also the White House and their press team. Back to the conspiratorial side of this. Is it possible something different happened? Is it possible that John Kerry maybe was engaged in a gunfight? Maybe ISIS. You know what Obama sells to us on a daily basis is this fear-mongering. Is it possible ISIL tried to take John Kerry out? And he was severely injured, maybe even potentially had suffered gunshot wounds, and had to be hillevaced out of France, put on this large aircraft, which seems a little extreme. I mean, honestly, seems very extreme to rush him in this huge airplane all the way back to Boston, of which now he's allegedly recovering for 6 months. Do I know that to be true? And again, this is a rumor circulating right now, kind of in the underground of this vein that makes up alternative media. Do I know this to be true? No. So let's make that clear. But let me ask you this. Let's say it was the truth. And let's say, just for a minute, that John Kerry was gravely injured in a shootout, an assassination attempt by ISIS or ISIL. Would the U.S. federal government and the White House and the Obama administration not cover this up? Would they tell you? Or would they sell you a bold-faced bullshit lie, something that you would believe, like John Kerry fell off his cute little bicycle and broke his femur? Has anyone seen John Kerry since the accident? Haven't really seen any photos or anything like that. Is there any evidence to prove that this was a bicycle accident and not something potentially worse? I mean, if this was, for example, hypothetically, an assassination attempt, again, the White House isn't going to tell us. That would be a massive breach in national security. That would make the White House and our intelligence community and our security community look like Bruce Jenner's new vagina. They would never tell us the truth.
AMTV, Christopher Green. And, you know, the thing is, they make it so easy for conspiracy theories to exist. And we've talked about this before. They feed the conspiracy theories because they really want to divert you from truth. Do I think John Kerry? No, this is all BS. But this feeds into a bigger issue, a bigger conversation with alternative media. Because, you know, he mentioned that this is a conspiracy theory going around in the alternative media. And we do have alternative media, and I'm not going to name websites or anything that really go off the wall with their theories. But how are they able to get away with it? How are they able to sell this to people as truth? You know, a lot of it comes from them trying to feed the misinformation. They rather you think about aliens and all kinds of other stuff than think about, you know, these people are just pulling the wool over your eyes and run around spending your money. They are benefiting off of your back. They are getting away with crime, murder, and everything you're told is bad. And while you argue and spread crap about, oh, it was an ISIL attack on John Kerry, he did hurt himself on a bike, you're just playing into the game. And really, when you look at the chess moves that are being played, and that people are like, well, then why are you worried about what the politicians are doing? I'm not worried about it. I'm informed about it. And there's a difference, you know, the whole thing about always being prepared type attitude when it comes to prepping is you got to know what circumstances you're in. So watching what politicians are doing, watching the chess moves that are being played, foreign policy, countries we supposedly are hating, and countries that we're with, and what groups are we with. All this matters in the big scope of what they're planning. If you want to see a economic collapse coming, know the signs of history that show collapses of societies, what they go through when they're going through something and they make this move. Why are they making this move? Did it help in the past? No, it's usually a grasp for, you know, the last straw. It really helps you see a bigger picture and be able to maneuver. And, you know, I go back to, you know, Albert Camus, to live free in an unjust world. You have to live so absolutely free that your very existence is act of rebellion, something like that. That's paraphrasing, but it really is. And, you know, when you want to be able to live free and be that, you know, free person, you better know what, you know, they're planning to do to prevent you. And a lot of it plays into the national scene and what they're playing in the world scene and what they can get populaces to go along with and turn you into this criminal. You you might be doing nothing wrong, living your life the same way for 20 years, but if you're not in touch with what they're doing and you're kind of a hermit, you might have your face plastered all over national news and getting, accused of things that, well, yeah, you might be breaking law, but you didn't know it was a law, and you've been doing it for 20 some years and you've never hurt anyone, and what's going on here? And definitely when you look at your right to defend yourself, your right to travel, your right to produce and live off of your own labor, and you see that they're taking every attempt to take that away from you, the ability to live free will be something that in the future, the way things are going, will be a very hard fight if we're not willing to fight it now and speak out about it and spread education and inform people about these things and understand, government is not going to fix anything. Stop giving government any power. Stop voting for people that, do this. And I just, it just amazes me how many people can be brainwashed. And, it does go back to youth, these yuppies, hipsters, whatever you want to call them. When they're brainwashed into thinking that they should be privileged. And, he put in his, that one article, privilege, they are taught that they are privileged. Why are they taught that they are privileged? Well, it's part of the political game because you're supposed to be able to get grants, you're supposed to be able to get loans, and you're supposed to be able to, you should be privileged because you went through education. Well, there's other people that have been more educated, more experienced, and a lot of other things that probably deserve it more than you. And as we're talking about, the chess moves, the foreign policy, we know the whole thing with Russia and China and what it's really going to. And I fear that the economic collapse will be the initiation of World War III. I think it will be that, they're hurting us. And it will be them hurting us because the world's going to go to their currency. But this isn't only coming from alternative media here in America. This is also being predicted by Chinese billionaire Jack Ma. And I got one more from AMTV here. I'll just hurry up and play it.
Christopher Green. Alibaba. Jack Ma, the Chinese billionaire, the wealthiest billionaire in China. He was actually recently superseded by an energy magnate, but then that magnate lost some $14-15 billion, I think, overnight in market capitalization. And now Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba, the kind of competitor to Amazon, the equivalent in China, predicts yesterday World War III. Yeah, that's right. The fearmonger that makes up Jack Ma, because of course we're always accused of this here, the alternative media, those with a thinking cap and a brain that has any kind of intuition or understanding of economics or geopolitics at all. Jack Ma predicts World War III. Yeah, that's right. The World War III. If you're local here in Arizona and you're part of our Hispanic community. World War III. But he says that this war won't be a war against nations, country pitted against country, like what we saw with World War II or World War I. This, he says, will be a war on climate change, on poverty, on infrastructure problems around the world. These
Great intellectual problems that people like Al Gore pinpoint on a regular basis, while in the meantime selling their media arms like Current TV to a Qatari-based oil family for $1 billion plus. You know, the same people that bring it to our attention that we need to attack climate change and all of these gross problems that we have with the world today. Notice, and note specifically, this Chinese billionaire, the owner of Alibaba, says that this war is going to be different this time. It's going to be a war, a global war where countries like the United States, he says, and China work together to kill the common enemy. He's talking about integration. He's talking about global government, one world government. Some people like to call it the New World Order, but of course you're called a conspiracy theorist if, again, you put two and two together and have a thinking cap of a brain. So he predicts World War III, but a joint effort by nations, not where countries are pitted against each other. Isn't it interesting that also in this given point of history, at this particular time of the year, there's also some very important meetings taking place, notably the G7. And in addition to that, much more prevalent in the underground here that makes up alternative media, which has now gone friggin' mainstream right in the face of the MSM in recent years, the Bilderberg Group meeting held in Austria, in the Alps, I believe, a very secretive event where these people, this squid that makes up Goldman Sachs and HSBC and all these billionaires like Bill Gates get together. I'm not sure, maybe Jack Ma's also attending. I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll be discussing world events. We'll be talking about Greece and the Grexit. They'll be talking about the upcoming U.S. election. Yeah, that's right. Let's elect that tramp that makes up Hillary Clinton 2016. She'll bend over and take it up the you-know-what to serve corporate interests. All these people, a melting pot of these billionaires getting together to decide your fate, to decide the fate of the world. As Jack Ma says, we need to attack the fellow billionaires, the top 0.001% of the world, need to attack this problem on behalf of the peasants, of the groundlings. You know, occasionally they'll throw us a breadcrumb or two, and one of those breadcrumbs, Jack Ma said, is that those small businesses in the United States need to start selling to China. Note that it used to be in reverse, that we bought everything from China. We were importing all of their cheap goods. We were the dominant superpower. Now he says it's in reverse. He says he's got great respect for Amazon.com and Jeff Bezos and his drone program and other companies like eBay, but he says that small businesses in America now need to start selling to the Chinese, where China becomes a net importer. You see how this is all changing hands? You see how the United States of America is now China's bitch, and China is kicking our ass? I did another video on this. Why is China kicking the shit out of the USSA? As if it's any surprise that as a result of this super debt leverage, this Ponzi scheme that makes up the Federal Reserve, an erosion of our common values, of really ethics to any degree, this corruption in the banking sector or in politics has led us to this bloodbath that now makes up a crippled America as it is today in its current form. You see, China is taking over the world. What Jack Ma is talking about, the founder of Alibaba, is that China is the new world leader. Of course, this ties into the world currency, the yuan taking a greater percentage weight of the SCR basket and the IMF, something I've also talked about extensively, how there's been a development of a new banking system through the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, with the BRICS nations, Russia, China, basically at war with the good old USA. But Jack Ma reminding us that these billionaires that have our self-interests at heart, of course, they've got all of our self-interests at heart and not their own. They're not inside dealing. They're not rigging LIBOR, as was the case with a multi-billion-dollar fine imposed on HSBC that's also attending Bilderberg. They're not doing or operating or engaging in any of these illegal activities. I mean, the entire reason they have a Bilderberg meeting is to figure out how to help the little guy, You know, how to put more money in our pockets and improve our quality of life with GMOs and genetically modified materials that we can swallow down if you're still dumb enough to drive through a McDonald's drive-through window. It's all in our self-interest, not theirs. But of course, what's interesting about this is a billionaire, a newly minted nouveau rich, a newly minted billionaire saying that he's got a problem deciding how to spend his money. He says it's more difficult, he says, Jack Ma says, to spend the billions than he's made than it was to earn it. I mean, it sounds pretty arrogant. I mean, I don't know. You could give me $1 billion. You could give probably any of you tuning in $1 billion, and you'd find some darn good use for it. I mean, most of the world can't even freaking eat or doesn't have clean water. You know, so part of the problem that these guys have is figuring out how to, I guess, distribute these funds in a meaningful way as they plan really global domination from multiple levels. Again, the intent here is integration of global government. It's exactly how all of this is going to play out in Greece with the destruction of the Eurozone, the crippling of the euro, the collapse of the United States. It's all going to be served, as I've said many times before, on a silver platter where they're going to recommend global integration. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the new war. We have a war on poverty. We have a war on climate change, et cetera, et cetera. All because it pushes their agenda. It pushes their selfish interests. Now, these billionaires have every right to meet. They have every right to have these secretive meetings, to do whatever they want. But it's up to us, the little guys, the little people that make up America and those citizens around the world and the global citizenry to educate ourselves to what the intent is behind all of this. One interesting figure notable attending the event is Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, the billionaire, part of the PayPal, mafia. Now, very interesting because there's a supposition that everybody at these meetings is evil. You know, we see this portrayed in the, alternative media where, it's basically every single one of these people at these types of events is some kind of vampire squid like Goldman Sachs. That, I think, is questionable, and it's naive to think that everybody there is evil. Maybe some of these people are working on the inside. You know, Peter Thiel is a pretty well-known libertarian. He actually backed, much of Ron Paul's campaign in the sums of millions and millions of dollars. Some questionable activity with his involvement with Palantir, which is a company that I don't know if he co-founded, but I know he's a part of, with some of the other PayPal mafia that works directly with the U.S. government and U.S. intelligence. Isn't that interesting? To basically generate and thumb through data to look for things like terrorism or anomalies in our financial markets, et cetera. All of this, again, about global integration. All of this about the government and companies like Google or PayPal, et cetera, becoming the new global government, becoming Jack Ma's vision, who says, interestingly enough, that his life was better before he was a newly minted billionaire. Now that he walks down the street, everybody has their hands out and is expecting a handout because of his newfound nouveau rich great wealth. Get it out everywhere. Jack Ma, billionaire, predicts World War III. Well,
AMTV Christopher Green. Now, let me talk about this here, because what this is playing into is what China is becoming is the new world power. Why does he say that some of these small businesses need to start selling to China? He's not talking about the mom and pop retail store. What he's talking about is, these hand furniture makers and a lot of the more valuable stuff that is made, because you think a lot of the cheap stuff we don't make here in America, or don't make here in America. The machinery was shipped, China or Mexico. The cheap stuff is being made in China. What he's talking about is we need more of the small business owners to ship their high quality goods to us, because they can now afford it, because they are now becoming a superpower. And when the U.S. dollar is no longer the reserve currency, when their currency becomes a reserve currency, those, small wage earners that might have still been able to save a little bit, the value of their money is going to go up. They will become the new superpower. And they have the U.S. in a checkmate, basically. And I think this is why the U.S., again, is going after China, being one of, or not China, but Russia, because they're one of, China's allies. Part of this is being helped by Russia, I believe. And that's why, well, if we can hurt Russia financially through Ukraine and the oil pipelines to Western Europe, we might be able, stave off this for a little while. And I just don't think it's going to work out. I think what we're going to end up doing is putting ourselves in a worse position. But, again, it really comes back to we have to use alternative ways of dealing with each other, bartering, gold, silver, Bitcoin, whatever, but we can't rely on the Federal Reserve note anymore. And if we get smarter, like Russia and China, where they have hoarded gold and silver, you might not come out on the losing end. We have a situation where we are kind of sitting at, where is this going to end? And I think we've dealt out all the chips that we could for the Federal Reserve note, and I don't think that we're ever going to see anything come out of that that'll be good for you or me. Before we end the broadcast, so I do want to tell you guys to check out the UCY store. Go to ucy.tv and click the UCY store tab and check out all the great deals. It's a partnership with Amazon that UCY has, and it gives you the same great deals through Amazon with the same shipping prices and everything. And at the same time, you get to help alternative media like UCY.tv that gives you the opportunity to hear broadcasts like this and the other great hosts and shows here on UCY. So check them out. They got prepping gear, camping gear, radiation prepping, a really, really, really good collection of things in the UCY store. So check them out, ucy.tv. Click the UCY store tab. And, talking about gold and silver, I have a personal favorite when it comes to buying gold and silver, and that's Moggy Metals. So if you want to check them out and help this broadcast out here in anti-tyrannynews.com, go to anti-tyrannynews.com/metal, and that'll take you to Moggy Metals. Get the same great prices. They're gold. They have a brackets where if you buy more gold, you get a better price. And before they even had that, they had some of the best prices out there. So check them out. Silver, great prices. Anti-tyrannynews.com/metal to check them out, and you're helping out this broadcast, and anti-tyrannynews.com. And also check out UCY store, ucy.tv. Click the UCY store tab. And, it's up to us to go out there and spread this information and support alternative media when we know mainstream media is not going to pick up any of this weight that a lot of alternative media has on their shoulders. Trying to get out to events, trying to, pay for all this. It really is something hard, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of personal money. Most alternative media out there is funded from mainly the people involved. The donations usually help cover some of the costs. And, it's not about making money. It's about getting information out there, and that's why we do that. Stay tuned here on UCY for all the great podcasts coming up, and I'll catch you this Friday. Take care.